The following is a conversation with Jesse Ringer. Jesse has been optimizing websites in 2011 and is the founder of Method and Metric, an SEO agency that helps companies grow their revenue. Tune in to hear more about Jesse's story.
Jesse, how are you doing, my man?
Hey, Daniel, I'm doing really well. How are you?
Doing great, and really appreciate your time to go on today. A lot of fun stuff to talk about. But on the show, before we get into all the fancy stuff, we like to wet our beaks with a bit of background. So, if you don't mind, could you share a bit of your background story?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jesse, and I'm the founder of an SEO agency called Method and Metric. We're based in Vancouver, BC. I've been doing SEO now for about a dozen years, and I first got into it just by fluke and good fortune, in that I really wanted to be a copywriter and working at an ad agency. And it was shortly after the 2008 financial crisis. And so companies weren't as reticent to hire junior people, especially in a full-time position. And so, as I was job hunting and looking for opportunities, I kind of fell into this SEO opportunity where I found that with creative writing, if my boss or a client, felt like they didn't like it, I didn't really have a recourse to kind of be like, well, actually, I think it's quite good, and here's why. My opinion didn't really count for much as a kid fresh out of school. But I found with SEO, if someone said they didn't like my writing or they didn't like how I structured something, I could point to the analytics and be like, well, the analytics show that a lot of people are engaging with this content piece, getting lots of traffic. You're also generating a lot of revenue thanks to this blog post. And so I found that analytics was a huge help in, one, developing my own confidence within the space, but also kind of showed me that I'm much more analytical and better at discovering patterns than I am at creative writing.
Got it. Awesome. Cool to hear about that. One of the things you mentioned, which I'm happy you brought it up, I was going to ask about it later, but you said, if you had a style of writing and sometimes, whoever your supervisor would be like, hey, Jesse, like this isn't great. And you would point to the analytics and the analytics would be like, no, no, this actually is good. Is there any public SEO data that people can look at that kind of gears to, if a certain kind of writing is popular or working or not?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of tools out there, but I think the easiest way to get started with it is, jumping into Google and doing searches for yourself. Find the topics that you're curious about or trying to rank for, and see what content ranks at the top. That'll be the best way for you to identify kind of, what content seems to resonate with people, what content Google thinks is valuable for its users, and then start to kind of formulate your own theories around what could work for your own brand. Because obviously those are going to be really different. What works really well for Amazon isn't going to directly work for, a mom and pop shop. So you have to figure out where your sweet spot is and figure out where you fit into that search market as well.
Got it. So as simple as a Google search to see what's working within your niche, and there's probably going to be a ton of articles or data out there, and then ultimately kind of mesh your niche to within the best SEO
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of free tools that you can just do a simple search as well and find, like, Chrome extensions and free plugins and free trials and stuff like that. So there's tons of opportunity to also get some high level data on what your competitors are doing or what the market is doing. Google Trends is another free tool that you can go and check out as well.
Awesome. I appreciate that. It's always great to get kind of practical tips for how to do this kind of stuff. So really awesome that you're sharing that. Another thing that I wanted to get into, one of the things in your background is that you got into website building really early on, and ultimately that kind of seems to have led your passion into ultimately going into SEO and helping clients optimize for kind of search. So how did you initially get into website building, and what made you kind of
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I think it. I think I was always quite fascinated with the internet and creating things and building things. In high school, GeoCities was a thing where you could go and build a free website, and I think that was my first interaction with that kind of environment, and creating something from scratch and putting it out on the web. Then, as I kind of grew up and needed to figure out how I'm going to make money and have a career. And so it stemmed from this need that I always enjoyed writing and enjoyed working in that space. And SEO kind of became a thing where everyone knew they needed it. Everyone that had a business knew it was important and essential for their business, but not a lot of people wanted to spend the time to learn it. And I happened to have a great instructor when I was in school that got me on board with the idea of SEO and digital marketing as a whole. And so it kind of realigned my past interests with creating and all that kind of stuff, but also kind of helping me find a way to have a career in something that I could really enjoy doing.
Okay, awesome. Fair enough. So you got it. We're just interested in the whole entrepreneurial nature from an early stage, and then you had fortunately a great instructor in college where some people don't love their instructors, but it sounds like you got lucky there, and that's what really ignited.
I mean, 1 out of 20 isn't a great record, but I'll take one good instructor. So
we'll see what we can get, but it's awesome to hear, and awesome to hear that you actually had an instructor who was able to kind of help you out and really work with you there to help you kind of ignite and reignite that passion. And the other thing, or kind of the next thing I wanted to mention, as you mentioned earlier, you are the founder of Method and Metric. Can you briefly explain what your company is and what that company does?
Yeah, for sure. So we specialize and focus on SEO for a variety of different businesses, but I'd say our main group of clients are in the SaaS space, so software as a service, technology companies. We also work with a lot of different e-commerce brands as well as service-based businesses. And under the SEO umbrella, we take on the analytics support, so making sure that we're able to properly attribute where dollars are going and where people are coming from and so forth. But also, once we get that traffic to your website, we take on the conversion rate optimization. So trying to maximize how many people will actually take action on your website. So whether that is, signing up for demos, buying your products, registering for seminars or webinars, we want to make sure that, getting people to your website are valuable people. Because again, at the end of the day, SEO is a performance-based marketing, and your website is going to be a huge tool for your business. And so we want to make sure that, getting the right people to your website and helping you generate revenue with your website is essential.
Got it. That was a great summary there. And one of the things you mentioned is that primarily your clients fall under this SaaS niche. So as you said, subscription as a service, kind of a recurring revenue model. Within those tech companies or within those clients, are there any common channels that you see that are more effective than others regarding SEO?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of my very first rules when I started freelancing and going into SEO was that we would never work with companies within the same competitive space. So we're never working with two, podcast companies, and never working with two employment lawyers, right? Pardon?
No, I was for example, a Netflix and Amazon Prime, for example, where they do the same exact thing.
Exactly. If you're trying to target the same keywords and we have multiple clients trying to rank for those terms, in a perfect world, we're going to have one client ranking number 1 and one ranking number 2. And number 2 is going to be pretty upset that they're not ranking number 1. And so that's always been a rule. And so with that experience, it's opened us up to working with a huge variety of brands, and each one is different. And it really depends on the type of website they have, who they are competing against, what does that search landscape look like. But what we have found with a lot of success is consistency in updating and making changes to your website, but consistency in blog content and new content, making sure that you're managing the technical debt. And I think all of that success, though, comes from a strong keyword strategy, and businesses and brands being really focused and zeroed in on what their value proposition is and who they're trying to target makes all the other stuff so much easier, because you're not pivoting all the time. You're not changing directions. You're not having to rewrite copy on a variety of pages. And so you're able to really stay the course and focus on creating value for your audience, rooted in the knowledge that you are focused and know exactly what it is that you bring to the market.
Got it. So it sounds like a common struggle that a lot of these companies have, specifically regarding SEO and within the SaaS space, is that they might try in-house to do a bunch of different things, but they'll never really find what works best for them. So sometimes it's better just kind of outsource that kind of thing to a specialist like yourself to really help them find a niche and execute SEO that way.
Yeah, like to add to that, it's like when you're running a software company, as an example, like your core competency is that software. Like your team's knowledge is this business. And, with agencies, mine and all the other ones that are out there, like all we do is think about SEO and analytics, and you get to tap into, an entire team of people that you wouldn't normally have access to. And we have tons of outside of experience that can translate really well to your business as well.
Got it. Awesome. So it's really interesting to hear, the fact that something you said earlier, you said in the SaaS space, you're not going to work with kind of two exact companies because it could be a conflict of interest. And, from my perspective, I think of like how many SaaS business models could there possibly be out there? So it sounds like there are a lot of different kind of subscription as service businesses.
Everything is a subscription service. Like everything could be a tool. Everything could be an opportunity to offload work for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so, it's you'd be surprised at how many unique businesses there are. Some will do really amazing things and some will do like steady, consistent things. But I think there is a large, market and an opportunity for us I think only twice ever had to like turn down business because we were already working with a similar brand.
Got it. It's probably, do you think it's more, I mean, I have the hypothesis that it's more B2B kind of focused because a lot of times businesses are trying to outsource the things that either one, they don't want to do or the stuff they're not really good at. So from your perspective, do you think it's more B2B clients working like selling SaaS or like B2C?
Yeah, I would say it's probably like 70-30 B2B versus B2C, and that's partly because businesses are more inclined to optimize their people's workflow versus a person. Think about like Instacart as an example. That was huge during the pandemic, and I think it's still going for an IPO, but at the same time, they're like not the same numbers they were in the pandemic because people are okay going grocery shopping. People are okay not spending the extra money for somebody to deliver that for them. And I think that is one example. Whereas in software, like, I can see on my tab, I got like 7 or 8 different software running. I got project management, I got Slack, I have note taking, I have Zoom and all these other things that help make my business run smoother, and it helps my team be more efficient. And so I think that's why there are a lot of opportunities in the B2B space to really hone in on that.
Got it. Awesome. So, it's interesting that you brought that up because I was like, I was in my head, I was like, how many different ways? And you're like, I have Zoom, I have Slack, I have, Microsoft has probably a zillion B2B products with their whole suite. So yeah, really interesting to hear about that and really insightful. I'm sure you've had the opportunity to kind of work with a bunch of different clients and have a bunch of different stories, but are there any stories that particularly stand out or kind of any really challenging client situations that you've had to deal with?
Man, do you want good ones or bad ones?
Whatever, whatever you think is memorable. Obviously, not asking anything proprietary, but high level, if you have anything that sticks out.
Yeah. Man, there was one that I think is quite interesting. This was from a couple of years ago. And they were a non-alcoholic cocktail brand. And so cocktails in a can, and they were, going really hard on the D2C side of things, but also working to get in like a variety of grocery stores and shops like that. And, I'm going to preface with like the learning from it was that they might have been too early for an SEO agency because we would go into our weekly meetings and we'd be asked to create an NFT. I'm like, we're not an NFT company. It's like, I don't care. Those are the audience that we're going after, so we need NFTs. I'm like, well, what are you going to do with it?
Don't do that.
I never had like a clear idea. One facet too that we were also grappling with was the fact that they had an e-commerce component. They were shipping non-alcoholic cans across Canada. And if you're unfamiliar with our climate, we get winter from November to March. Cans freeze. The drinks were exploding upon delivery. And that was one facet too that we also weren't prepared for. Like, how do we, our business, our goals were based on e-commerce revenue, but if we can't sell anything and ship products for 6 months out of the year, it was really hard to really validate our work. One thing that I also took away from all of it was like, with a newer company, there's a lot of pivoting going on. There's a lot of testing and iterating that goes on that is very hard for outsiders, for agencies to really be able to kind of deliver on their promise. The flip side is like, also, if we're changing course all the time, it's really hard to like have a cohesive keyword strategy, a cohesive brand strategy, because we're always changing directions. So those are some things that were quite difficult. And like, I took a lot of learning out of that too, and applied it to my own business and then to the agency here, because it's like, we need to be able to stay the course. We need to be able to kind of validate and test new ideas, but also see how well they actually fit, with our brand ethos and who we are as a company. Because once those things start to come about where they are inauthentic, like the NFT thing, it never took off. And really, NFTs, I think, as a whole, are not where they were during the pandemic. But at the same time, it's, you have to try new things, but be mindful of the risk and reward, and the risk specifically around the relationships you have with vendors and clients and your team.
It's good you're bringing that up, because I think a lot of times when people go into, or people expect every single client engagement or every single case to go perfectly, and like, oh, this is a match. But realistically, there's probably going to be a lot of times, especially early on, where you take on a client and then you have kind of that oh shit moment where you're like, okay, this might not be the best fit, and you're trying to figure things out. So, on the bright side, at least you got to learn from it and kind of be prepared for the next time you're in a situation.
Yeah, it was a lot of notes taken after that, during that postmortem, being like, all right, when he said they wanted to do advertising but couldn't advertise too much in an effort to disrupt their relationships with their grocery store vendors, that should have been a sign that maybe this wasn't going to work. Because how do we bring in traffic to the website and generate revenue without compromising those real world relationships with these brands that carry a lot of clout that might have canceled their contracts? So there's a lot of like
stuff to
one of those things where like, maybe we need to pump the brakes, even if it's a cool brand and it seems like an awesome opportunity. We have to be honest with ourselves about how likely we are to succeed with this. And because on the flip side, then you also have a bit of a maybe someone that won't refer you next time because that relationship didn't work. So
for sure. I mean, look, you win or you learn. So,
yeah, totally.
Happy that you have you seem like you're having like the long-term view, and even if an opportunity seems really exciting, you have to think, is this something that's really great for us and really sustainable? So awesome to have that perspective. Another thing that you mentioned was that, working with that brand, aside from, a few other disagreement of ideas, I'll try to keep it as politically correct as I can. But is there anything else, like when you're approaching a client, or, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it, but from the client's perspective, when do you think would be the best time to take on an SEO agency? Because you mentioned it was too early. So, what is there a checklist or a kind of vibe that clients should have before?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that has been an evolving process for us. And, it's going to be different for every business. Like, there are some companies that we work with and they are fresh out of the gate and it works really well. There's other ones where it's a total disaster. And so I'll share with you some of my discovery questions that we have like with clients, because I think that for us at least has been a great way to reveal, where their thinking is at in terms of how this relationship will go, because that's ultimately what this is. Like, we don't work in a silo. We don't like get your website and then talk to you in 6 months and be like, here you go, and we invoice them every month. Like, it's very hands-on, and we meet with them every week, and so it's quite intense, I guess, like especially in the early going. So questions that we have, one, how do you see SEO adding to the rest of your marketing strategy? Like, I don't believe that SEO can be the only way that you're generating traffic and business, and it is not a silver bullet. So how do you think about that in terms of your business growth, and how does this help feed the rest of your efforts, or how does it work in tandem with your efforts? That's a big one. What are your goals for your website? And that's needs to be clear. Otherwise, we're going to be running kind of rudderless in terms of what direction we need to go. We have a good idea of what those goals are, but if they don't align with what you believe the goals are for your website specifically, it's going to be really hard for that. How open are you to making wholesale changes to your website? And that includes navigation, potentially colors, obviously content, imagery, and a lot of the messaging too. And so those can be things that are quite hard for some founders in particular, myself included, to really part ways with. Like, I see myself in a lot of clients that I work with because I hold on to things. Like, it's very personal when you build a brand.
Sentimental value in a way, even though it's for a business practice. You're like, I built this baby. I don't want things to change with it.
Exactly. It's really hard. It's very hard. I don't think that it's an easy process for somebody to be like, hey, this is the thing I built. Yeah, you can come and just like delete it and start over. I'm not going to be bothered by that. That's impossible. Like, that would take a lot of self-awareness and a ton of therapy to like be able to do that. And so those are some of the big questions like I want to ask. Like, also, who are the decision makers in terms of us getting approval to make changes? If it's just you and you're open to the other ideas that we've shared, then that's great. But if you have a marketing manager or I don't know, a business development manager or any kind of other team member, like, if they're able to kind of look at the website from a more strategic or detached view, so to speak, of the brand, like, that'll be a good sign. And I think the biggest question that we need to know, and you should ask yourself before engaging with any kind of agency, like, what is your long-term view for your business? Because SEO is not a quick win. This is going to take at least 3 to 6 months for you to see results. It requires a fundamental change of how your website is kind of structured and the keywords that you're targeting, and that really does take its time to really do it well. And so if you're looking at SEO to bring you new leads within a month, that's not really going to work out. And if you have like a 3 to 5 year view of where your business is going and what you plan to accomplish, that'll help you kind of understand the relationship you need from an agency a lot better, because you'll have a clear vision of where your business is going and what value you expect the agency to bring to your business. Because at the end of the day, you're spending money on these people to drive results. And if you are, too tied to an immediate impact, you're going to be really frustrated, because it takes time, it takes planning, and it takes a lot of consideration into what is going to work for your business.
For sure. I have to commend you on that approach too, because I know a lot of times, especially kind of we'll just call them the bigger professional services firms who seem to have every sort of kind of service available. They just try to sell right away, and then like, oh, we'll figure out all like the client issues on the spot. And I really commend your approach in the sense that you're like, hey, like we need to find out if this is going to work, because if it's not going to work, like at the end of the day, people make money, lose money, but time is our most valuable asset. So, if you can
Yeah.
save everyone time, if it's not a great fit, I think that's really commendable. And I think also it's really great for you guys in the sense that you're approaching client situations where obviously there's stuff to figure out, but you relatively know what to expect and how to achieve something without having to worry about all like the political or kind of indifferences later on. So really
Yeah.
great to hear about that.
Yeah. It's like dating. It's like building a relationship. Like nobody goes into dating someone. Maybe they go into casually being like, I only need this for 2 months.
Mhm.
Great. In my mind, and I think I can speak for a fair number of agency owners and agency workers, like we're thinking like 6 months, a year, 2 year long relationships. Like we're thinking long term because that's where the most value will come for those businesses. Like I've been working with some brands for 8+ years and they continuously see more and more progress and business growth. Like it's one of those things that if you have a good relationship and there's a ton of trust between your business and the agency you're working with, and specifically the people you're working with, things go a lot better and are much more successful. If it's combative in those conversations and neither side can see eye to eye or compromise, like it's going to be a disaster. So those are some key things that I've picked up over the years.
For sure. On that note, are there a lot of follow-up engagements that you have with clients kind of looking to pivot their SEO strategy in the future? Or do you find it's usually kind of one-off work with certain clients?
Yeah, I would say that the vast majority of our clients are retainer based. We will initially start on a 6 month or maybe a 12-month campaign. And from there, we'll continue to build from that. 6 months is usually a good sign of like where the relationship's going and how well we're going to work together for both sides. This has to be a good relationship. I've said that a lot, but it really does matter. And so, they generally stay on for, 12 to 36 months, if not longer. And it really just depends on what their business objectives are and all that. So it's certainly not rarely will we do like a one-off ad hoc project that is just like, hey, here's some optimization stuff, go do it. We might do that kind of in tandem with other projects we're doing for a client, but very rarely will we be like take on a new client where it's just like, okay, here's an audit and now go optimize it. That's not really, it doesn't set us up for success, and it very rarely sets the client up for success. And then everyone's kind of left feeling like it wasn't a good match.
Fair. So it sounds like it's a retainer-based thing, and then as you work with them to improve their SEO, if they like you after 6 months, they keep you retained, unintended there, and you kind of keep working with clients. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's a really great model. On a personal note, are there any on/off-topic question? Are there any books that you think have been really helpful to your development, whether it's in SEO or just any books you like in general?
Man, SEO is a tricky one because it's always changing. The algorithms are changing, your competitors are changing, what people expect from the search results is changing and how they engage with websites too. But man, yeah, there've been lots of I like to read a lot of books about how people think, and not necessarily about psychology, but about like group behavior or cultural shifts and things like that. Because I think that is quite revealing in terms of, what people want from businesses.
Mhm.
I really like reading and understanding that kind of stuff. But let me see if I can pull up the name. There was one on like big data. One that I just read, Predictable Profits, was a really good book. It's helpful for any business owner to kind of systematize a lot of their work and think about how they're going to grow and maintain consistent revenue. When I was much younger, the E-Myth about entrepreneurship, I can't remember who wrote it, but I read that like a good 15+ years ago. and that really stuck with me. It was about like creating a system for your business, and that's how you'll grow and scale your business, is like have a repeatable process. Yeah, then the last book that I read that stuck with me was Living in Data. It's a data analyst who just the way he views the world and how he would apply big sets of numbers to solving problems and things like that. But those three books have had a pretty solid impact on how I think and do business. And that's always changing, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you sharing some of the books there, and hopefully if anyone else is interested in going down SEO, they can check out those books. But really appreciate you sharing your story and kind of the stuff that you're up to. I always like to end with just a few personal notes. So on the personal end, is there a fun fact about you that not a lot of people know about that you'd want to share?
Oh, that not a lot of people know about. Man. Oh, I guess like this, I'm very big into snowboarding. I've been doing it most of my life, and I travel a lot for it, and my intention is to snowboard on every continent. That's one goal I have, and that's probably something that most people don't know about me. That would be easily. I mean, everyone knows I love snowboarding. It's not a well-kept secret. My team laughs as soon as it starts getting cold here because like your favorite season is coming. So, but I do intend to snowboard on every continent.
Yeah, that's an awesome goal. I always like, before I get into the last two things, I always like asking these questions at the end, because then, similar to something I asked before, it's almost like you have a library of things in your head that you're trying to pick like the best one, but not overshare something. So yeah, it's not something to bring up. But the other personal question I wanted to ask: what brings you the most happiness, would you say, in your life?
Oh man, snowboarding first and foremost.
Awesome.
I would say my partner and my dog. Those two, I couldn't do a lot of things without them. And then I think movement, being active brings me a lot of joy. It helps clear my head, but it also, keeps me centered and feeling happy. And I think traveling too, seeing as much of the world as I possibly can, brings me a lot of joy. And if I can combine all four of those things, then that's great.
Awesome. That's awesome. And the last thing I wanted to get into, you've shared a lot about how you got into entrepreneurship, the stuff you've been doing at Method and Metric, and some practical SEO tips, and then some personal stuff at the end. Jesse, is there anything else you want to share, whether it's business advice, relationship advice, personal advice? The final word is yours, man.
I think the advice that I would share is connected to all of those, in that how you conduct yourself in business and in life and with people, it's one and the same. And the relationships you build on a personal level but also on a professional level, they really do help serve you throughout your career. I can speak to the fact that my business is largely based on word of mouth and the relationships I've cultivated over the years. And granted, like, the work has to come with that, but I have a lot of people that advocate for me, who have spoken up for me when I was too shy or too embarrassed or not comfortable enough to do it. And I think that comes from the relationships that I've built. And I think that regardless of, what you do in your personal life and what you do professionally, as an entrepreneur, they're going to be extremely intertwined. I don't turn off Method and Metric at the end of the day. I'm thinking about a lot of things that are coming later. And my conversations with people are always kind of the same thing, that my work informs a lot of my life and my life informs a lot of my work.
Got it. Awesome. I think it's a great final note. And Jesse, thanks so much, brother. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. This is a great conversation.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Jesse Ringer. If you enjoyed the episode, rate the show on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, and subscribe.